It was another late shift at St. Augustine's Hospital, the kind of night where the halls were silent, the lights dimmed to a hum, and the only sound was the occasional beep from a monitor or the distant murmur of nurses exchanging updates. I had always found comfort in the quietness, the stillness of these moments. But that night, comfort was a distant memory. I had just finished my rounds and was updating a patient's chart when my pager buzzed. The message was simple. Supplies needed from the basement. Supplies in the basement meant a journey I didn't particularly enjoy, but duty called. I made my way to the lift, pressing the button and waiting as the elevator hummed to life. As the door slid open, I was greeted by the sight of a patient inside. She was standing there, seemingly lost in thought. Patients were allowed to wander the halls, stretch their legs, especially those who had been with us for a while. The only rule was they needed to be back in their rooms before 10. I glanced at my watch. 9:45. I smiled at her, a polite, tired smile, and stepped inside. The air was cold, the kind of cold that seemed to seep into your bones. I pressed the button for the basement, noticing that she hadn't selected a floor. An odd choice. But perhaps she was waiting for me to make a selection. I didn't think much of it. The elevator began its descent, the soft hum of the motor and the occasional creak of the cables the only sounds. I glanced over at the woman. She seemed off. Her eyes were focused on something distant, something only she could see. She wore a green band on her wrist. Alive. As we reached the basement, the doors slid open to reveal a dimly lit corridor. Shelves lined with medical supplies, shadows flickering in the dim light. I stepped out, but before I could move further, I noticed something that gave me chills. In the distance, a man was limping towards the elevator. His movements were jerky, unnatural. Panic took over, and without thinking, I slammed the button to close the doors. The last thing I saw before they shut was his wrist. A red band. Deceased. I had performed his surgery the night before, and he hadn't made it. As the elevator ascended, my heart pounded in my chest. The silence felt heavy, pressing down on me. The woman beside me spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. "Why did you do that?" "He was trying to use the lift." She sounded annoyed, which was so different from the dread I felt. I turned to her, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you see his wrist? It was red. He died last night." She lifted her arm, her wrist now visible. The green band was gone. In its place, a red one. She smiled, a slow, unsettling smile. "Like this one?" My head was spinning. How could this be? Was it a trick of the light? My tired mind playing games with me? The band was there, stark and undeniable, a sign of death. I stumbled back, pressing myself against the wall of the elevator. I was breathing hard, my mind racing. The elevator continued its ascent, the numbers ticking by in a slow, deliberate crawl. Each second felt like an eternity. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. She tilted her head, studying me with an almost clinical detachment. "I'm just a patient," she said softly. "Like all the others." The words lingered in the air, filled with a meaning I couldn't understand. The elevator dinged, signaling our arrival at the main floor. The doors slid open, and without a second thought, I bolted out, not daring to look back. The corridor was empty, the lights brighter than before, almost blinding. I rushed to my office, my breath coming in short gasps. I needed a moment to collect myself, to understand what had just happened. I shut the door, and the room's silence surrounded me. My mind raced with questions. Had I imagined it all? Was it a hallucination brought on by exhaustion? I could still see her face, that haunting smile. I sank into my chair, trying to steady my thoughts. The memory of the red band on her wrist was vivid, refusing to fade. I reached for my phone, intending to call my wife, to hear a familiar voice and ground myself in reality. But as I picked it up, I noticed something on my desk, a small folded note. My name was written on it in a delicate handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened the note. Inside, a single sentence: "See you soon." My blood ran cold. How did this note get here? Who left it? Questions raced through my head, each more terrifying than the one before. I stood up, the note clutched in my hand. I had to find answers. I couldn't let this go on. Couldn't live in this state of perpetual fear. I made my way back to the basement, determined to confront whatever it was that haunted me. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow, each second stretching into an eternity. When the doors finally opened, the corridor was just as I had left it. Silent. Shadows moving in the flickering light. I stepped out, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. I walked on, each step battling the increasing dread. The shelves, stocked with supplies, felt insignificant now. And then I saw him. The man with the red band. He stood at the far end of the corridor. His eyes locked on mine. There was no emotion in his eyes, just a chilling emptiness. I took a step back, my mind screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. I had to know. "Why are you here?" I demanded, my voice echoing in the silence. He didn't answer, just continued to stare. I felt a presence behind me and turned to see the woman from the elevator. Her smile was gone, replaced by an expression of sadness. "You're not supposed to be here," she said softly. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you want from me?" She reached out, her fingers brushing against my arm. "We're all patients, Doctor. Just like you." Her words sent a shock through me. I looked down at my wrist, and there it was. A red band. My mind reeled, memories flooding back. The surgery, the pain, the darkness. I had died. The realization struck me hard, the truth too awful to grasp. The woman took my hand, her touch cold. "It's time to go," she said. I followed her, the corridor stretching out before us like a path into the unknown. The man joined us, his presence a silent comfort. As we walked, the fear began to fade, replaced by a strange sense of peace. The journey was over. The horror had passed. And then, as we stepped into the light, everything went black.